Hi, this is Rebecca Rogers with Focus on America. For those of you who do not know, Focus on America is a grassroots organization formed to promote individual liberty, family values, the U.S. Constitution by actively participating in the political process. Focus on America is inspired and compelled by our forefathers, men who risked everything to ensure our freedoms. We encourage Americans to be informed members of their communities, to recruit and develop candidates to restore our God-given, constitutionally guaranteed liberties, and to replace elected officials who do not represent their constituency or American values. We meet the third Saturday of each month, and we host numerous special events like the recent Alabama gubernatorial debate. You can find more information at focusonamericA.us. We have a public and a private Facebook page, an Instagram account, and YouTube and Rumble. So be sure and look for us there. If you'd like to get involved, reach out to us. There is a form on our website. We'd be happy to have you in. We love fellow patriots working together for a common good. After all, that is what our country was founded on, and we want to get back to that. So today I have a very special guest and part of our candidate series. It is Micah Messer. He is running for Alabama State House District 38. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then we're just going to jump right in, for lack of better words. So Micah Messer was born and raised in Kinsey, Alabama, which is right outside of Dothan. He spent 10 of his 12 years of primary education being homeschooled by his parents. The last 2 of his high school years, he attended and graduated from Emmanuel Christian School. After graduation, he attended the University of South Alabama, where he studied computer and information systems with a minor in military science. He also served on the Student Government Association as senator for 2 years and 1 year as Chief Justice. He was also very active and worked closely with the Young Americans of Liberty organization. Upon graduation, Mr. Messer was commissioned in the Alabama Army National Guard as a second lieutenant and served the people of Alabama until finishing his commitment in December of 2020. Throughout his career in the Alabama Army National Guard, he was promoted to first lieutenant, served as the acting commander for his signal company for almost a year, was a line-of-duty investigation officer, served as an assistant J6 Joint Communications Officer at Joint Force Headquarters, and was regularly rated above his peers. Throughout his time in the Alabama National Guard, Mr. Messer worked for Right Side Broadcasting Network as a camera operator, producer, and eventually in 2019 the Chief Operations Officer. He also served the people of Columbus, Georgia as a police officer, where he learned what it really meant to be the thin blue line. Mr. Messer also earned his private pilot certificate and high performance endorsement and is currently studying for his instrument rating. He is married to his beautiful wife Jessica, and together they own a husky mix named Captain. Mr. Messer currently runs and has been running a side business for wedding videography for 9 years as an IT professional. So, Mr. Messer, what have you not done? I mean, that is quite a resume.
Yeah, I actually talk to people all the time. I'm like, you would think I would be 40, but I'm only 28.
So,
As my wife says, I can't sit still. I'm always wanting to do the next thing and get going and make a difference in some way or fashion.
well, that's a good thing. I'm the same way. I don't do caffeine. I don't need the caffeine, and I get aggravated. No one really wants to be around me if I'm on caffeine, so I don't sit still well either. So I totally understand that. So the question being, why now? Why are you running? What's so important about this time that compelled you to run for a political office?
Sure. So this kind of starts back to college. In college, I felt the call, so to speak, into public service. And that wasn't very defined of what exactly that meant and where that would go. Obviously, I served with the National Guard and I served as a police officer, serving different communities, Alabama, then Columbus, Georgia, and so forth. But really, what kind of turned me towards politics was 2020. And a lot of things happened in 2020, and I won't go into 1,000 different details, but what we saw was government overreach on a scale we had not seen in probably decades. And it wasn't just on the federal level, which a lot of times we like to focus on, but it was also on the state level, the county level, local level. sawing curfews being put into place, like a virus cares about curfews, and other things of that nature just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And then I started digging. And anyone who knows, and you probably know this, Rebecca, when you start digging into something, you start finding out little other tendrils and rabbit trails. And you start following those rabbit trails, they lead to other ones. And I started seeing that Alabama, though is a very conservative population, consistently has a very liberal Republican Party that supposedly is conservative, but then votes in things like the gas tax raise, and more increase in regulations and fees and things of other nature. So I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I started digging into my representatives and my people that I'm supposed to go to solve these problems, and started seeing the same pattern. So, as I tell other people, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired of someone going to Montgomery claiming to be a true conservative and then ending up voting a very poor conservative record. And that just frustrated me to no end, to the point where I was like, okay, someone's got to run against this person. We got to find somebody to run and take this person on. And I searched and searched and searched, and I couldn't find anybody. Most people don't want to get into politics. I don't blame them. It is not necessarily a fun thing to do, to the point where I was like, well, maybe I'll have to run. So me and my wife, we talked and we prayed about it, and eventually we made a decision that I should run for something. And we eventually decided on State House, and so here I am.
That's awesome. Yes, that's basically the backstory of Focus on America. I was praying for someone, for God to send somebody to do something, and then after praying that for several weeks, it was like, you're somebody. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was like, you're somebody. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
So Focus on America was born. We had a fellowship. We started meeting mask-free, no social distancing. We all survived. We had a
Who
great
would have
time of
thought?
fellowship, and they need each other. We were designed for fellowship with one another. Even when we disagree, we need other humans. That's just the nature of how we're designed.
That's
So
correct.
I'm glad you decided that you saw what God saw, that you are somebody, and that someone to run was you. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. How do you feel about, you mentioned that Alabama, in politics, we tend to pretend or you didn't say that, I'm saying that we pretend to be conservative, or everybody talks about how conservative Alabama is. However, we're also in the top 5 for corruption. And then we keep passing bills that do not reflect so-called conservative leadership. Our House and Senate leadership, maybe we need to redefine leadership for them, because apparently they don't understand conservative leadership, and they've become a part of the people who say all the touch points that you and I were speaking of, and then they get elected, and suddenly they just become part of the good old boy network that rides off into the Montgomery sunset. Well,
Yes,
people are tired of that. So with Jump Right In, we want to get beyond those. Do you think there's a corruption problem in Alabama?
100%. I've seen some examples of it firsthand on the county level here in Lee County, and I've seen it on the state level too. And of course, we've seen some federal things that make you know look at it a little funny, and your ears start to twitch a little bit. So yeah, I definitely think there's a corruption issue, and some of the issue is legal corruption, but that gets into some weeds. But yeah, there is absolutely a corruption issue.
And do you believe there's a political establishment that has a foothold in
Oh, without
Montgomery?
a doubt, without a doubt. That's not shouldn't even be. It's not really a question. Yeah, 100%.
So, as we were talking about the COVID restrictions and things like that, uh, how do you feel, and would you support legislation limiting the powers of the state health officer? And if so, how would you suggest we go about doing that?
Yes, so I definitely think we need to limit it. There's two ways I would do it. One, it needs to be either elected position or someone who is under an elected position, so they can be held accountable to the people. Otherwise, you have someone who's appointed by a board of lobbyists that ends up kind of making determinations on the whole state. And and that's not okay. So one, we need to get that done. Two, we also need to limit on time any type of order that's put forth that gets signed into executive whatever by the governor or however you want to go about it. There needs to be a time limit on that. Not an indefinite time period. There needs to be you can only do it for 30 days. Past 30 days, it has to be approved by the legislature. Otherwise, it goes null and void and be done with it. I personally am against any type of executive overreach, period. I don't think when it comes to, we have to allow people to make common sense decisions on their own health. We can't determine that. The government's not responsibility is not to determine that for the individual. And that means whether they go to work or not. That means whether they leave their house and go to the grocery store or not. That means that the business stays open or not. So there definitely needs to be limitations on even what those orders can be and when they can be used.
Oh, I definitely agree. And I believe all of our members would agree with that. So, would you support legislation that would allow the legislature to call itself back into session? Because we have seen, you know, the state health officer and our governor, she didn't want to call them back in because she calls them a bunch of slow turtles. Uh, and they couldn't make a decision. And we didn't see legislators standing up fighting to come back. We saw where the only person that can call the legislature back into session in the state of Alabama is the governor. The Speaker McCutcheon and Lieutenant Governor Ainsworth, the Constitution allows them to put into writing a request to the governor to call the legislature back in session. They didn't even when we applied pressure and we called and we requested that, they never did what the Constitution allows them to do. And the excuse was, well, she's not going to do it. However, now we see those are the very same people that are supporting her but yet they never did what they are allowed to do by the Constitution. It was all speak and no action. So would you support the legislature uh, passing legislation to call itself back into session?
Yes, 100%. If you look at my website, which we'll plug at the end, but one of my stances on there is actually under curbing emergency powers is to allow the legislature to call themselves back or into a special session. And that could easily be done with the technology we have, where all you need is a majority. You get a majority of people say, yeah, we need to come back together and deal with an issue, then you call the special session and then it occurs. There's no reason why that can't occur. Of course, that would be a constitutional amendment. It can't just happen with a resolution or an act or anything like that. It would have to be something passed by the legislature, then brought before the people of Alabama at election time to vote on. But I think the people would agree that they do need to be able to call themselves in the special session to act as that checks and balances that's supposed to be in place. Right now, the legislature, except for when they're talking about impeachment, they can only call themselves, like you mentioned, they can't call themselves a special session. They're only in session from January to April. So yeah, definitely needs to happen. And I'd be more than willing to sponsor legislation, co-sponsor legislation, or vote for it.
Okay, and that leads me to the next question, which is accountability. And this is a two-part question. When you're elected, how are you going to hold yourself accountable? And then how do you think we could do a better job of holding our legislators accountable?
One, obviously, integrity is a big thing. It has always been a big thing for me ever since high school. When I was in the Civil Air Patrol program, that was one of their big things was integrity. I learned all about it and what it meant and so forth. Integrity is hard to prove because the whole point of integrity is doing the right thing when no one's looking. But one of the things that my wife will definitely keep me in check with that. My mother will as well, so will my father. And I have a couple of guy friends that I also meet with on a pretty regular basis and talk to pretty frequently that are also going to keep me accountable on my own values and what I'm supposed to stand for and so forth. Being open and honest and transparent is a big thing for me. Sometimes I'm honest to a fault. And part of that transparency is being completely transparent with the people that elected you. Unfortunately, a lot of legislators are not that way. They keep everything hush hush, and then at the end of the day, when they are up for re-election, they tout whatever legislation they believe will get them reelected. To me, that's not how a representative is supposed to be. They're supposed to represent the people that elected them. So that's a big part of accountability, is being transparent. I also think as citizens, in the way that we can keep our legislatures more accountable, is to be more tied into it. Too often, and I'm guilty as anybody with this. Like I said, I didn't start really paying attention until 2020. Too often, we just kind of sit back and relax and maybe watch a couple hours of news or something and think, oh, Congress is not doing what they're supposed to do, or the president's not doing what they're supposed to do, but aren't really thinking about the state legislature or the governor or our county commissioners or city councilors. I think we need to get back to being a government that's governed by the people, and that means people getting involved with Focus on America or other organizations like that, and keeping an eye on the legislature, watching what they're trying to pass.
Absolutely. We've seen that firsthand. So now I'll go to something that is really important for a lot of our members, and I know you have it listed as well. And I have to tell those who are listening, I have to really respect you, because up front you said that you were game for anything and everything, that you were willing to discuss anything. So I really appreciate that. I really respect that, because that's the way we are, and we respect people who are that way. We know there's no perfect people. We know we're going to mess up. We
Yep,
know that things are going to happen, and that's when that open, honest, direct, transparency comes in. So I just wanted to take that to plug that and let you know that I really do appreciate that.
for
So
sure.
with Alabamians' education through K through 12, well, everything is important, but especially our K through 12. So we've been told when we were in Montgomery over and over and over by certain legislators that Common Core does not exist in Alabama. And I quote that on multiple times. The most recent contradictory example is the passing of the Numeracy Act, which cost taxpayers over $90 million a year. And doesn't go to coach our students or anything like that. It goes to teach our teachers how to teach math. Now,
Correct.
if Common Core is not a problem, why do our teachers need to be taught how to teach? Because that's what they went to school for. So
Right.
how do you feel about that?
So that's multifaceted. Let's first start with the whole idea that the Numeracy Act doesn't teach Common Core. Part of the Numeracy Act's language is, removes Common Core, or whatever you want to call it. And the sponsor of the bill said this multiple times in interviews and whatever. It's not about Common Core, not about Common Core. Well, he's partially right. What a lot of people do, and we're seeing this now with critical race theory, is they change the name. And that's what Alabama did. They changed the name from Common Core, which is what was originally adopted, to the Alabama College and Career Ready Standards, the ACCRS. When they did that, they changed a couple words here and there, and you can look at them side by side. There's examples out there, and it's the same thing. It's virtually the same thing. There's a few differences here and there, but in general, they're basically the same thing, which means the curriculum that gets adopted by the state school board and eventually by the local school boards also involve Common Core math. So when the Numeracy Act got passed, what they're in fact doing is instilling Common Core math as being what is going to be taught, and they're going to bring in 650 or so, math tutors, which most of them will probably be master's level. First off, where are you going to find those people? It's hard to get teachers nowadays anyway. They're going to bring them in to teach teachers how to teach math. And it's lunacy. It's not common sense. My big thing is let's get back to common sense math. 2 plus 2 equals 4. You get it wrong, you get it wrong. Try again. Nominators, denominators, like these things that are important. And me being as an IT guy, I just cringe. I absolutely cringe when I think about these students leaving high school, barely knowing how to even, do multiplication or addition or whatever it may be. And they're wanting to go into the IT field. And I'm sitting here going, in programming, if you don't get it right, it's not going to work. It's going to have an error. And when that error throws, that entire program's going to crash. So it kind of concerns me, if we're supposed to compete with the world on the technical stage, why are we teaching a system of math that doesn't make any sense and is not what is being used in the technical area? It just makes no sense to me. And of course, part of this whole issue is those who are making curriculum have been lobbying for that curriculum to be used. And when they lobby, of course, there's money exchanged here and there. We'll pay for this for your campaign or whatever it may be. And then their curriculum gets adopted, and now we're 52nd in the nation. So when you're bought and paid for, which a lot of Alabama legislators are, and that's probably going to offend some of them, but hey, it is what it is. When that happens, this is where we ended up. You can't continue down a road that is continued to push you lower and lower and lower compared to other states, and we have. So,
Oh, absolutely. And the Common Core, the people who sold us the Common Core is now also selling us the answer,
of course, yeah.
which is, the
Let's create the
Numeracy Act.
problem, and
So
then
we'll
here's
send
here's
those
the
in.
answer to it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of like Big Pharma. Oh, here we're going to give you the problem and the solution and profit off both sides of it. So
only a
with
few
that being
billion
said,
dollars.
how about PACs? How do you feel about PACs? Do you think they should be limited? Do you think they should be eliminated? I mean, there are some good PACs, but
Right.
should there be limits, or how do we keep our legislators from being beholden to the people like the BCA who, push for the gas tax and who push for employer allowed vaccine mandates? Those are things we just need to get beyond. What are your suggestions there?
So I'm not against PACs. PACs are just a group of folks who have a particular standpoint on certain issues, and they want to support people that are running for office that have those issues, and they want to donate money to them. Now, there's a lot of bad PACs out there, but there's some good ones, like you mentioned. Alabama Freedom PAC. They're one of the one of the few PACs that have endorsed me, but they're actually one of the good ones. There's very few of those, but there are some out there. So I think limiting is a good idea. Right now we have unlimited corporations and organization donations towards campaigns. I think that is where a lot of our problems are stemming from. You look at legislators, the legislature I'm running against, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars from special interest groups and lobbyist organizations. And that really almost becomes an impossible uphill battle for people like me who, I don't plan to bow to these lobbyists, and therefore they don't even try to reach out to me. And I think that's a big problem when you're coming into the campaigns, when you can purchase $100,000 worth of TV ads and the other candidate can't.
Well, that's because PACs don't want to talk to you because they already have their yes man.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep, exactly.
I mean, that's why Focus on America wants to talk to people like you and liberty lovers who are going to stand for the average people. I'm just an average person, and I'm so thankful there are people who are willing to give up their conveniences to put everything on the line to run for office. So thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
And then I wanted to talk to you about, we hear a lot about critical race theory, or its new name, social emotional learning. Our House leader just passed HB 123, which allows every school in the state to have a mental health officer or counselor, whatever they're called, in the school without parental involvement. Now, there was a midnight deal made where parents have to opt in up to 14. But I don't know about you, but when I was in middle school and high school, those are your formative years, and you're searching for things. And if my parents grounded me from certain things or took away privileges, I thought they were mean. It didn't mean that I needed mental health counseling. And then I know there's a time and a place. However, you don't open the door for DHR or the government to come in and to steer your child over something so simple. So how do you feel about SEL, critical race theory? And since we're talking about schools, how do you feel about mask mandates in schools and vaccine requirements in school? Are you for parental choice? How do you feel on those things?
Sure. So let's first talk about SEL. SEL, I'm against 100%. It is not the job of the government, which includes the school system, to teach kids how to emotionally become better. It is the job of the school system to teach them arithmetic, teach them English, how to read, write, science, and history. That's the job of the school system. That's what we gave it to them for. We did not give it to them for them to become the parents of the child. Now, granted, I used to be a police officer. I saw plenty of parents unfortunately, or people, guardians, that would check out and they would just send their kid to school expecting the school to do it all. And teachers, my mother in law being one of 30 years, has to wear 5,000 different hats for 5,000 different kids that come through their classrooms every single day. And when that happens, they start taking on those roles of being the mom, being the dad, being the counselor, or whatever it may be. So I'm not against counselors being in schools for when a child comes to school and they're just absolutely devastated by something that happened at home. But at the same time, that parent, that guardian, needs to be made aware of that the kid wanted to be counseled or something of that nature. You can't, and this is a big issue that we have in culture today. A parent's job, parent's responsibility is that kid. And the government's responsibility, if something happens with that kid, is to notify the parent or the guardian. And that includes any type of counseling that may go on, or requests for counseling. A lot of times, especially with kids, like you mentioned, something happens where they get grounded and they're not happy about it. So they may say something that, let's say they, like, I'm so sick and tired of life, I just want to be done, or something like that. And that's considered a suicidal thought. And if that happens, obviously there needs to be someone trained to take care of that situation, be like, hey, like, that's not what needs to happen, something like that, right? But at the same time, there needs to be notification to the parents, hey, your child today said this. Back in the day, you used to get phone calls from teachers, hey, your child said this at school. And there's a lot of that involvement. There's a lot of cultural issues that go in with that, why parents and stuff aren't involved, or guardians aren't involved, or whatever it may be. But definitely, we need to be very cautious when it comes to counseling of children without any type of parental knowledge. That's a big no-no. SEL is obviously a big no-no. Critical race theory is a big no-no. We don't need to be teaching divisive education, saying that just because you're white, you'll always be the oppressor, and just because you're black, you'll always be oppressed, or anything along those natures. So I'm against anything like that, as I state on my website and things of that nature.